Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice is a game that deals seriously and respectfully with mental illness. Specifically, an illness that is little understood and often demonized: psychosis. Not to be confused with psychotic, psychosis is defined as a mental illness characterized by loss of contact with reality. People with psychosis may suffer hallucinations, seeing things that aren't there, voice hearing, which is just as it sounds, and the more complex concept of delusions, false beliefs, things the person is certain are true, which are objectively untrue. Severe episodes of these events are called psychotic breaks, and it is just such an episode that Senua is suffering from in Hellblade. Having a psychosis is not itself an evil, it's an illness. While many of the hallucinations and symptoms can be quite terrifying, as described by the people interviewed by Ninja Theory for the game, it can also be beautiful. It's another type of lived experience, one outside the norm, often referred to as being neuroatypical. Like the ending theme says, to us, the world is different. The reality of living with psychosis is woven into the mechanics of the game. Psychosis can cause things to look broken, like a torn photograph, like the mirages Senua must fix to pass through certain areas. It can cause people to see connections and meaning where there is none, like seeing a shadow and thinking it's a magic rune, or believing her mental illness and Dillian's death are connected by the darkness. The darkness itself is a hallucination, which is why the game mechanic of dying too much, leading to permadeath, doesn't seem to be real. I've never experienced it, and the consensus online seems to be that it hasn't happened to anyone. That may be because this too is a delusion. She thinks she will fail and die if the rot reaches her head, but the rot is a hallucination. She's not really dying. For a video game, a setting like this, the Norse realm of Helheim, is standard. Gods and magic are often portrayed as real in this medium, but this isn't a game where characters charge spells and fight real demons. Like Dillian says, the most difficult battles are fought in the mind. These things that Senua sees are not objective reality. The people that appear in-game look out of place. They're realistic-looking humans overlaid on the game. It conveys the truth of their origins, their hallucinations, flashbacks, memories. Druth, for instance, is a person Senua met in the wilds. Here, he appears as part of her hallucinations, the stories he told her informing the world her mind creates. The true enemy in this game isn't her illness, it's the stigma she suffered because of it. Her father's abuse, being ostracized by her peers, and the lonely isolation of her childhood. The darkness she imagines as the source of this pain comes from the dark hole her father trapped her in, where she was alone with shadows and faces only she could see. The walls are covered in what looks like runes and other symbols, likely the same symbols she later sees everywhere. Senua's name comes from a real-world Celtic goddess, newly discovered in recent years. Her name was Senuna, originally misread as Senua. She appears to have been a highly venerated goddess in Roman territories, where she shared many of her symbols with the goddess Minerva. Senua herself is from further north, the Orkney Islands. She's a member of a group of people lost to the tides of history, the Picts, barbarians so fierce they terrified Rome. The Romans built Hadrian's Wall to keep the Picts in Scotland, as they often raided the south. In the 8th century, Vikings began raiding Pict territories, and this is the time period Hellblade is set in. The name Pict was a Latin term, meaning painted, referring to how the Picts adorned themselves with blue paint, as Caesar once wrote. Eventually, the Picts merged with Celtic Scots, and their individual culture was mostly lost. There is a lot of Celtic influence in Hellblade. There's Celtic knotwork and design throughout the levels, and Celtic symbols throughout the game. During times when Senua uses the focus, symbols appear in the air, many of which are Ogham, an early Irish language. The belief that the head is the seat of the soul is Celtic too. The Celts would keep the heads of their enemies due to that belief. In Hellblade, the enemies we fight are called the Northmen, representing the Vikings who killed Senua's lover, and they are all headless and faceless. Because they are soulless, they aren't real. And, perhaps reflecting Senua's belief, the people who took Dillion from her are monsters. Senua is called a Gelt in the game, as is Truth, her mentor. It's a Celtic concept that literally translates to "he who goes mad from terror." The most famous literary example is the story of Mad Sweeney, an Irish tale of a man who is cursed and goes mad in the middle of a battle. He spends the rest of his life in the wilds, where he's known as a Gelt. These people were likely the mentally ill, perhaps warriors with PTSD, who long before modern medicine were left to fend for themselves. The game is a hero's journey, Senua's story of self-discovery, in which she takes several steps towards recovery and personal growth. She has to remember and come to terms with her mother's death, her father's abuse, her own self-loathing, and ultimately, Dillion's death. To do so, she faces multiple trials and tests, all of which are likely hallucinations, that help her to face aspects of her past and herself and come to terms with them. Her trials mostly reflect Norse myth, but there are elements mixed in from other cultures, changed to fit the narrative her mind is weaving, which is why the gate to hell is guarded by Surt, a Norse figure, and Valravn, a Danish figure. The Valravn is a Danish folktale of a creature born from ravens that eat the flesh of dead warriors, something Valravn does in the game when he feasts on Senua's felled body. The other figure, Surt, is a giant said to bring about Ragnarok, the end times in Norse myth. He will end the world in fire, and then it will be reborn. An end that brings a new beginning. These two figures represent major themes Senua is dealing with, themes of death and ending. These trials reflect part of her journey. In Surt's level, we hear more from Druth, the man she saved, his story, and her experiences taking care of him. In Valravn, she faces her memories of exile, and comes out the other side stronger, but still not yet ready to face the worst horrors. When she crosses the bridge to face Hela, she falters and loses. There are mirrors throughout the game. Senua carries one on her waist given to her by Druth. The final level is behind a large mirror that Senua passes through. This game is about who Senua is, and the mirror is a symbol of self-reflection, of looking inward. Here, after her failure, we see Senua speaking to herself in the mirror, overlaid with the voices of her hallucinations, showing us clearly she is the origin of all these sights and sounds, and that she is punishing herself. Being abused and mistreated have clearly led to anxiety, depression, and self-harm behaviors alongside her psychosis. But still, she gets up and keeps going, leading to the next set of trials. If she is not strong enough to fight a goddess as a mortal, clearly she needs a tool that will make her strong enough, and a sword from myth is the perfect choice. The sword Gram. The weapon was sealed into a tree by Odin, chief of the gods, and Sigmund was the only one able to withdraw the sword. Out of jealousy at this feat, Sigmund's brother-in-law betrays him, and this betrayal leads to the brutal deaths of most of Sigmund's kinsmen. The story is a tale of loss and revenge, a fitting companion for Senua. To obtain the sword, Senua faces 4 trials, through which she is guided by the figure of Dillion. He appears as a silhouette of beautiful light, starkly opposed to the suffocating darkness that represents her struggles with mental illness and the abuse she suffered at her father's hands. Dillion will also appear in flashbacks and memories as a fully formed person, but Senua's father will often just be a black shape or a hooded face. He is the darkness. But Dillion is light and love. When Senua first approaches the tree where Graham is found, the scene is a beautiful field of flowers and light. This is what Dillion is to her. He makes the world beautiful. She refers to her memories of him as fleeting moments of light. The tree as a symbol ties into themes of eternity. The tree is where they met, and it's where Senua finds the strength in herself to face Hela. There's multiple doors with a tree inscribed on them, in which the roots and branches of the tree intertwine. It's an ancient Celtic symbol called the Tree of Life. The symbol has many interpretations. It is often seen as a symbol of the natural balance of life, the cycle of life and death. After obtaining the sword, Senua begins to realize her potential. The voices refer to her as a goddess. She now wields a god's weapon. She obtains it by facing things from her past, such as the plague which she felt was her fault, the times when her illness would cause her to lose touch with the world, and the moment she told her father she was leaving. These are big moments, memories of things she's overcome, moments of strength. She's becoming a hero, but she still has to survive the journey and slay the goddess. In one of the levels, she has to navigate by shifting through a light world and a dark world, representing her world, the way she saw reality, and Dillion's, or perhaps her life with and without him. One of the worlds is blue and rainy, the other light and warm. Light is safety in the game. Here we have the first instance of enemies that are incredibly deadly and only held back by light in one of the levels, representing how the darkness in Senua's life was held back by the light of Dillion's love and support. In this level, Dillion's voice literally leads her out of the darkness. In these worlds, Senua is told she must trade suffering for wisdom, as Odin did when he traded his eye for the runes that are spread throughout the game. That is what she's doing, suffering greatly in order to learn how to go on without Dillion, to obtain the wisdom needed to be at peace with her past and her future. Once she has the sword, she faces the sea of corpses, a representation of the death caused by the plague and her guilt. There's a part of her that worries her father was right, and that would mean these deaths are on her conscience. She struggles to know what to believe, and is surrounded by horror throughout. It only grows as she moves towards hell, almost losing Dillion. In this level, she faces long stretches of literal darkness, where remaining in the shadows for too long will kill you. Here, she faces her memories of her father, her childhood, but there's a part of herself trying to protect her from it. She speaks to the camera, saying she must keep going forward, even as the voices warn her she won't survive it. The camera in this game is fascinating. During most major cutscenes, Senua is talking to us. As the player, we are Senua, and ultimately, Senua is speaking to herself. The voices are part of her, and we are the voices. We are the darkness. We are her father, and we are Dillion. This choice emphasizes the themes of the game and also makes it more emotional and poignant, as we have a personal, intimate connection with Senua in multiple major scenes. Despite setbacks and a great deal of struggle, Senua continues on. She comes to the final stretch. Here, she passes through a mirror and faces a younger version of herself. This is the self we've seen in memories and flashbacks, the one without the blue paint of a warrior. Her younger self was afraid of the truth of her mother's death and repressed it. Her younger self ran away to be in the woods, believing her father when he said she was cursed. Now she is a new person. She is a goddess with a god's sword who has faced her past and is ready to face the truth. The old Senua is left behind. This is where we learn how Senua's mother died, that she was burned as a sacrifice by Senua's father. This is the third sacrifice of the game. Dillion is sacrificed by the Vikings, and the title of the game implies these events are a sacrifice themselves. Senua's sacrifice to the gods to try and bring Dillion back. The theme reinforces the idea of gaining wisdom through suffering, that you must sacrifice to gain something worthwhile in return. But 2 of the 3 sacrifices are actually murders. It is only the willing sacrifice, the selfless sacrifice, that brings about true revelation for Senua. Senua's mother appears on the pyre as half-burnt. Soon after, we see Hela standing as a half-burnt giant. The closer Senua gets to the goddess, the smaller she becomes. Hela was enormous when we first saw her. By the end of the game, she will be the size of an ordinary human. Hela represents both Senua and her mother, the mad women who could see and hear the underworld and had a connection to the realm of the gods in the eyes of their people. Now, when Senua's mind imagines a goddess, that is who she sees. In part her mother, who Zinbel accused Senua of worshipping, and in part herself, because this journey has made her one who walks a goddess, as Druth says. This is why the final scene of the game shows Hela mourning Dillion and saying goodbye, before changing back to Senua, because that is who Hela is. The half of her that is carved with symbols might relate to Senua's childhood. She says her father attempted rituals to fix her, and these symbols and wounds might have been part of it. Like Dillion and Galena, Senua dies, which was also predicted by the voices earlier in the game, who said she had died before and would die again. But that death, which is a hallucination, is what brings her to her final revelation, that all along the darkness she's feared has been the reality of death, the fact that Dillion is truly gone and she can't bring him back. The final battle is one that Senua loses. There is no victory because victory would imply success, and Senua will not succeed in this quest. Dillion is dead. There's no bringing him back. The voices in the beginning say there will be no more stories after this one, because at that point, Senua is resigned to the end, unable to imagine a life without Dillion. But the ending has a different message. A new story is beginning. There is still life to be lived, so long as you're alive. That's why the symbol of the game is what it is. The circular pattern is a Celtic symbol called the Spiral of Life. It's drawn as one unending line, a symbol of eternity, of the cyclical nature of life, ever turning, still going on after we die, because there's always more stories to be told.